Prince Harry has told London's High Court that coverage by the Daily Mail made his wife, Meghan's life, an absolute misery.
The courtroom didn't just quiet, it felt as though the walls themselves had stopped breathing, as if every clock, every whisper, every rustle of paper had been frozen in place. This wasn't the polite hush of a typical hearing. No, it was a suffocating, almost tangible stillness, the kind that crushes the chest when reality slams violently into long-held belief. 11 words. 11 meticulously selected words that detonated a marriage, obliterated a carefully curated public image, and exposed a reality too shocking to fully grasp in that moment. The effect was immediate. Even the most hardened reporters, those who had witnessed wars, political corruption, and royal intrigue, stopped mid-sentence. Pens hovered, fingers frozen over keyboards, eyes widened involuntarily. And then there was Harry. Those words, tied to Diana, made him flinch. They made him tear up. They weren't shouted. They weren't staged for effect. Judge Margaret Thornbury simply read them aloud from a private message. Calm, precise, clinical. Yet in that room of polished mahogany and centuries of law, the words became instruments of devastation, slicing through layers of curated narrative like a scalpel through silk. Prince Harry didn't react. He shattered. And the moment, the single, unbearable instant, altered everything. Imagine being there, watching someone's life collapse before your eyes, live, raw, unfiltered, not on screen, not in fiction, real, crushing, immediate. That was the February morning in London's High Court. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing down on every person in the room. Up until that point, the trial had been tedious, painfully predictable. Lawyers shuffled papers. The judge's voice remained steady. Reporters scribbled. Standard procedure. But when that line was reached, something in the air shifted. The oxygen itself seemed to flee. You could feel it leaving the room. All eyes turned toward the witness box. Harry sat rigid, military posture, jaw clenched, eyes forward, determination etched into every line of his face. Then came the first crack, a subtle twitch of the jaw, almost imperceptible. But then his hands, resting on his knees, clenched into fists so tight that the knuckles turned bone white. That famous face, the one that had smiled on magazine covers, waved from palace balconies, twisted into something unrecognizable, pure, primal pain, raw, devastating. He lowered his head slowly, as if trying to vanish entirely, trying to disappear under the weight of years of grief suddenly weaponized. And then, breaking the awful silence, came a sob, guttural, broken, real, not polished, not the vulnerability of a carefully staged interview, the sob of a man discovering that the lie he had feared all his life was even worse than he could have imagined. The betrayal within the betrayal, that is the true horror. These messages weren't meant for anyone's eyes, but Harry's. They were private conversations between Meghan and a trusted California friend.
That their pattern of destroying evidence and concealing their unlawful behaviour continued into the litigation itself.
Someone she had known since her acting days, someone she had confided in everything, until now. That friend had quietly aligned with the defence. What had been handed over wasn't gossip. It wasn't casual venting. It was calculated, cold, precise. Judge Thornbury had warned earlier. The messages contained graphic implications, manipulative strategies, evidence of meticulous orchestration designed to exploit the deepest wounds. The courtroom was about to see a different Meghan, not the vulnerable duchess driven out by media and institution, but a tactician, a strategist, a master of personal branding orchestrating the decade's most audacious public rebrand, centered entirely around Harry's sacred grief, his mother, Diana. Those messages, which made Harry tear up again whenever she was mentioned, hung over the room like an invisible blade. Pause. Think about that. Harry's grief.
You know, you're 12 years old, I just refused to accept that she was gone.
The trauma that had defined him since he was 12, the wound that shaped his life, had been scripted, prepped, staged, not for healing, not for care, but for headlines. Imagine waking at 3 a.m., drenched in cold sweat, flinching at camera flashes, haunted by the night your mother died. only to realise your deepest pain had been reduced to content for someone else's strategy. The judge read on, but no one listened anymore. All eyes stayed glued to Harry.
Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, couldn't be present today. However, he's prepared a statement following Mirror Group's acceptance.
His shoulders rose and fell like stormy waves. Every sniffle, every tremor echoed loudly. His attorney rose, voice sharp, urgent. Your Honour, I request a recess. My client is experiencing severe emotional distress. Denied. Procedure ruled, even as Thornbury's voice thinned slightly, betraying her own shock. Phones buzzed, rules broken, fingers flew across keyboards. Prince Harry collapsed in court. The message had detonated the Sussex defence.
Breaking news to bring you now from the High Court. The Duke of Sussex has settled.
What began as a slow-moving privacy case had erupted beyond containment. 4 hours of near-total silence stretched across the courtroom. Harry did not speak. Face flushed, eyes swollen, hands trembling. Message after message landed like blows, subtle, surgical, relentless. One referred to a family dinner as a goldmine of reactive content. Another, bake empathy into his next public appearance. And the one that cut deepest, he wears grief like silk. We just need the right lighting. Grief, like silk. Reduce trauma to texture. Display agony aesthetically under optimal conditions. Even seasoned reporters, hardened by war coverage and corruption scandals, sat slack-jawed. This was beyond reputation. It was a reality, a world-view, dismantled in real time. Therapy sessions rehearsed. Oprah interview disclosures analysed and annotated. Meghan's texts dissected every word, every pause, every breath. Each revelation chipped away at what Harry had once believed sacred. He shifted, back stiffened, then slouched, sagged, rubbed his face until red streaks ran across his cheeks. His lawyer whispered. Harry didn't respond. 2 hours in, the air grew unbearably heavy. And then, the message that silenced even the legal teams. He still wants their approval. It's pathetic, but I can use it. The guilt over his mother makes him easy to redirect. That's the engine. From the back, someone whispered, Jesus Christ! Harry flinched. No sob this time. Just eyes closing, opening slowly, hollow, as if a flame inside had been extinguished. His security team exchanged glances. One took a subtle step forward.
You know, my grandmother has been amazing throughout. After my grandmother had said, the moment you land...
Another unhooked a water bottle from his belt. They didn't act. They were ready. The courtroom held its breath. Every heartbeat thundered. Every whisper stopped. Prince Harry remained in the box, stripped bare of pretense, trapped in grief and betrayal. Each revelation dissecting the very fabric of his life. His hands shook, back slumped further. Every message struck like a knife. Observers were paralysed. Pens paused. Phones stopped. And yet, through the chaos, he endured, quiet, trembling, present. His security detail, trained for every crisis, watched silently. This was not the public figure, not the smiling royal. This was a human being, exposed, vulnerable, broken. And the courtroom, heavy with centuries of law, now bore witness to a raw, unfiltered collapse that would echo for decades. His back sagged further. His hands trembled more. Every revelation tore at him, and through it all, the courtroom waited, silent, as a man absorbed the weight of betrayal, manipulation, and grief, leaving every onlooker stunned and breathless. His security detail exchanged glances. One officer took a subtle step forward, another unhooked a water bottle from his belt. They didn't act, but they were ready. The room seemed to vibrate with a tension so heavy it pressed against the ribs, as if the air itself feared what was about to unfold. According to a palisade present, Harry looked as if he had forgotten how to exist fully in his own body, trapped somewhere between being and observing. When the judge asked if he needed a recess, Harry didn't answer verbally. He simply gave a nod, a small, almost imperceptible motion. Not defiance, not defeat, just the hollow gesture of emptiness, the nod of a man whose agency had been stripped away by timing, by evidence, by the betrayal of someone he had trusted above life itself, the subtle acknowledgement of a world running on someone else's rules, the monetization of royal pain. It wasn't a concept. It was a lived experience, being enacted in real time. After a 30-minute break, Harry returned, physically present but emotionally absent, a hollow echo of the man who had walked into the room hours before. His gait was measured but sluggish, almost reluctant to occupy space. His eyes were rimmed with raw, red exhaustion. His suit jacket hung off him as though borrowed, unfamiliar, ill-fitting, an outer shell that could not hide the inner fracture. There were visible marks on his sleeve, faint traces of tissues, tokens of private anguish. One of his lawyers attempted to offer him a notepad, a lifeline to organize thought amid chaos. He didn't take it, and so the presentation continued, cold and relentless. The court had entered what the defense had termed Phase 3, the monetization of royal pain. Messages were dissected with meticulous precision, each one examined for its potential audience impact, for the story it could tell, for the arc it could craft. Discussions included which childhood memories retained shelf life, which traumas could be teased out in podcasts, which revelations saved for memoirs. Meghan had written to a confidant about the layers of Harry's pain, deciding which moments would resonate, which could be weaponized, which could fuel engagement. "Don't waste it all," one message read. "On the first product, Harry's got layers. The abandonment arc hasn't even been fully tapped." Abandonment arc, a phrase that reduced decades of suffering into a serial, multi-season narrative to be mined for maximum effect. Another line suggested, "We need a clip of him saying something about the Queen's corgis. Nostalgia is pure engagement." By this stage, Harry no longer reacted to individual messages. His hands were limp, his eyes fixed on the edge of the witness box, his breathing shallow, almost mechanical. Only the faint twitches of his jaw and the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest betrayed the presence of life. The judge noticed. She paused again, eyes flicking to the bench. "Does the witness need another break this time?" His lawyer answered calmly but urgently, "Yes, Your Honour. He needs a moment. He is not well." Harry didn't move. He stared straight ahead, the act of standing seeming capable of ripping him apart. When the court recessed, he did not walk unassisted. Security flanked him, guiding him with gentle, careful pressure, like paramedics leading someone traumatized through a hall that had become hostile to the soul. The 3 categories of betrayal. The next morning, when proceedings resumed, the world seemed suspended. The presentation that followed was methodical, devastatingly organized into 3 distinct categories, each meticulously labeled on evidentiary folders, visible to cameras, journalists, and the gallery alike. Category 1, monetization. Category 2, family manipulation. Category 3, emotional exploitation. The first category, monetization, spanned exchanges from late 2022 through summer 2024. They were not scandalous in tone, but were strategic in nature, dressed in the vernacular of a branding memo, camouflaged as intimate correspondence. One message broke down revenue streams tied explicitly to emotional narratives. Diana legacy is halo, William is unresolved tension, Catherine is comparison vector, Charles is redemption thread if ever needed, us survivors reclaiming identity. The Netflix contract was described as a pension vehicle, a financial scaffolding built atop grief. Meghan wrote that the royal trauma arc needed to stretch across at least 3 projects to secure long-term cash flow, punctuated with a warning about trauma fatigue to ensure pacing would keep audiences engaged without collapse. Merchandising strategies followed. A children's line called Archie Bears, a motivational picture book for Lily, branded content directly leveraging the Sussex children's identities. The most audacious note was titled Crisis Capital, detailing how negative press could be alchemized into higher engagement by framing it as bullying, injustice, or colonial backlash. Bolded in the margin, "We don't run from scandals, we alchemize them." Publicly presented as organic vulnerability, the internal strategy now appeared surgical, calculated, and deeply transactional. The second category, family manipulation, revealed Meghan's cold view of her relatives not as family, but as adversaries and players. Prince William, described as a polished threat due to his anger and institutional loyalty, was identified as more dangerous than Harry. Catherine, labelled the uncrackable mask, was dissected mercilessly, with speculation about her mental health, parenting style, and public composure. King Charles was described as sentimental, pliable in the right light, a tool to soften or reconcile the public narrative if needed. The children, Archie and Lily, were discussed in terms of their appearance and media optics, the weight of royal blood carefully measured against public perception. The third category, emotional exploitation, was the most piercing, exclusively about Harry. It revealed how his vulnerabilities, traumas, and innermost thoughts were catalogued, analysed, and repurposed. Meghan recounted therapy sessions, the tunnel dream, seeing his mother's face before the crash, night terrors, fear of helicopters, guilt and shame, all indexed and strategized. Grief was transformed into content, suffering into a tool. One message silenced the courtroom. He said he misses his brother. I told him that's just memory, not reality. Nostalgia lies. Redirect fast. Control masquerading as concern. Human emotion stripped to a vector of perception management. Harry's face, as this was read aloud, was ashen, motionless, his expression louder than any verbal protest could have been. He did not cry. He did not speak. He simply stared. But nothing in that room compared to the final message, delivered slowly, quietly by Judge Thornbury. Harry's love for them is a vulnerability. If we don't manage it, it will derail everything. Not his love for me, not our love for each other. His love for them, his family, his past, his identity. As the courtroom sat in stunned silence, it became devastatingly clear. These messages hadn't just destroyed a narrative, they revealed a machine, a mechanism to control perception, emotions, and people, with Harry at the centre, not as a prince, not as a husband, but as a tool. The aftermath began the moment the courtroom adjourned. Institutional silence cracked. The palace's response was measured, but definitive, coming from Clarence House, King Charles himself. This is a difficult time for all families. Some matters are best resolved privately and with compassion. Sources described the king as calm, but drained. Upon reading the transcripts, his first words were stark. This is not vengeance. This is gravity. The household was ordered disciplined. No leaks, no gloating, no vindictive commentary. This was not a victory. It was a collapse. What hurt Charles most was not institutional damage, but the revelation that his son had been reduced to a pawn, a project, a walking strategy with trauma as currency. Prince William seethed in silence, furious not at Meghan, but at Harry. He let her do this. He handed us over. When reading the message labelling Catherine the uncrackable mask, he went silent. The global reaction within 48 hours was swift, polarising, unprecedented. Even Meghan's staunchest supporters were left speechless in the United Kingdom. Public opinion did not just shift, it fractured. Polls showed Harry's sympathy ratings plummeting to their lowest since his departure from royal life. Meghan's favourability sank further, with some surveys placing her in single digits. The United States painted a more nuanced picture, but media analysis was merciless. Morning shows dissected manipulation tactics, newspapers critiqued betrayal, social media erupted into a battlefield, and the hashtag Harry deserves better trended. The digital world erupted in a way few could have predicted, the kind of viral storm that feels simultaneously distant and uncomfortably close. Alongside the hashtag Meghan exposed, TikTok exploded with therapists dissecting the messages, identifying subtle patterns of gaslighting, manipulation, and emotional control. Clips went viral of professionals analysing text exchanges line by line, pausing to point out how phrasing, timing, and emphasis had been engineered to influence perception. Instagram influencers who had once posted supportive content began quietly deleting old posts, their curated feeds now potentially toxic, their brand associations suddenly risky. Corporate sponsors felt the heat almost immediately. A streaming platform executive speaking anonymously admitted, "We bought a memoir, not a manipulation manual," a statement that quietly confirmed a seismic shift in the perception of Sussex-branded content. Several high-profile brands started distancing themselves from projects tied to the couple, entering what insiders described as indefinite review, halting campaigns and shelving upcoming launches while analysts scrutinized the psychology behind the pain. Mental health professionals who had reviewed courtroom footage and the message content identified something crucial. This was not simply public embarrassment or standard media fallout. Harry was experiencing a phenomenon therapists call reality dissolution, a condition in which the very foundation of someone's lived experience is destabilized by the deliberate actions of another. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a trauma specialist, explained on multiple news outlets that when someone you trust uses your deepest wounds as strategic tools, it doesn't just hurt your feelings, it fractures your sense of reality itself. Every memory, every decision, every moment once believed authentic is suddenly suspect. Harry was now forced to reconcile that moments he had once assumed were genuine connection were, in fact, performances, carefully staged to produce an outcome, curated for narrative impact. The messages regarding Diana, his mother, were particularly devastating from a psychological standpoint. Having spent decades processing her death, seeking therapy, and opening up publicly about his struggles, Harry now faced the revelation that even these sacred processes had been optimized for engagement. Experts described this as a form of psychological violence, a calculated intrusion into the sanctity of personal grief. It's one thing to be betrayed, Dr. Mitchell noted. It's another to discover that your life, your choices, your grief, your love may have been orchestrated for someone else's purposes all along. You weren't living your own story, you were performing in someone else's production. Perhaps most chilling were the quiet confirmations of what palace insiders had suspected for years. Multiple sources, speaking on condition of anonymity, confirmed that senior royals had noticed troubling patterns long before the courtroom revelations. One former aide recalled a conversation with Prince William in early 2020. "My brother speaks differently now. He uses words that don't sound like him. It's like someone's written a script and he's reading it back." Catherine reportedly shared similar frustrations, observing Harry and Meghan's interviews, recognizing phrases and anecdotes that Harry had once told differently, now repackaged with altered emotional weight and new conclusions. Even King Charles, known for his diplomatic restraint, expressed quiet concern to trusted advisers. "I don't recognize my son's voice anymore. The words are his, but the message feels manufactured." The tragedy, insiders emphasized, was the impossibility of intervening. How does one alert a son that his wife may be manipulating him without fracturing the fragile remains of the relationship? How does one prove that authentic emotion is being weaponized? The answer, of course, is that you cannot. All that can be done is wait, observe, and prepare for the inevitable moment when truth is exposed. That moment arrived with devastating precision in a London courtroom. Amid this high-stakes drama, two young children became the most heartbreaking collateral. Archie and Lily, referenced repeatedly in their mother's messages as potential branding opportunities, now represented something far more complicated. Innocent casualties of adult conflict. Legal experts speculated endlessly about custody implications. Should Harry leave, or should the marriage dissolve under the weight of these revelations? The question of where the children would live became a maze of legal jurisdictions. British law, American law, royal protocol, and international custody agreements were poised to collide in unprecedented ways. Royal historians noted that no children with direct royal blood had ever been subjected to such a complex cross-continental custody consideration. The implications were staggering. Sources close to Harry revealed the depth of his fear, that his children were being raised in the same manufactured environment he had just discovered he himself had been living in. Every milestone, Archie's first steps, Lily's first words, was now filtered through the lens of content potential versus genuine family memory. The messages had planted seeds of doubt, and for a father desperate to grant his children the authenticity he had been denied, those doubts were excruciating. Could Harry recover from this? Could he safeguard their innocence and identity while navigating a world designed to exploit both? Public sentiment shifted subtly but noticeably. Sympathy toward Harry did not evaporate entirely, but it morphed into something more profound: pity, an empathetic recognition of the man who had been manipulated at the deepest emotional level. Millions watched courtroom footage, the shaking hands, the blotchy face, the silent agony. experts weighed in, highlighting signs of gaslighting, emotional coercion, and psychological manipulation. The emerging narrative reframed Harry not as a controversial figure or a manipulator, but as the betrayed. Reports suggested that King Charles communicated, through intermediaries, that Harry would be welcomed back to the United Kingdom privately and discreetly, not as a working royal, not in front of cameras, but as a son in need of his father's comfort. The institution may have its rules, Charles allegedly said, but a father has none. Catherine, too, reportedly believes the children deserve connection to their roots, despite the pain. Only William remained silent, his wounds sharper, deeper, and more personal, the betrayal between brothers not constitutional, but intimate. Harry now faces 3 roads forward. He can stay, rebuild, and renegotiate, attempting to forgive someone who may have rewritten the very story of his life. He can leave, disengage, and fight for custody and identity across the Atlantic. Or he can return, come back to the United Kingdom, to a family still reeling, to a public still judging, to an institution that may offer comfort but never forgets. Each path carries a cost, demands sacrifice, but only one may offer clarity, authenticity, and truth. And after everything, after the tears, the transcripts, the trauma, truth is what Harry may now crave most of all. Because in the end, no matter how far a prince travels, no matter how many crowns he walks away from, he is still a son. He is still a brother. And perhaps someday soon, he might be ready to come home. The question isn't whether the door is still open. The question is whether Harry has the strength to walk through it. If this story moved you, made you think, or left you speechless, share your thoughts and feelings below. We'd love to hear your perspective.